Welcome to Valdyr. Today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the platform and how to get started with our toolset. When you sign up for an account, you'll be greeted by this homepage. There are two really useful buttons here. One is our Browse Presets button, which we'll be clicking in a moment, and the other is our Getting Started doc. This video is going to overlay nicely with the contents in that Getting Started documentation. If you prefer to read rather than watch and listen, you can always click there and get a comprehensive overview and guide that's in text format. Today, though, we're going to focus in on the Browsing Presets button. Some of our customers are going to come to us with their compliance already complete or partially built. They might have a variety of standards and policies that they're enforcing, and they're just looking for a better way to keep track of everything, document everything, and then provide that data to auditors. But there's a lot of new customers who are coming to us with a fresh slate. They recently learned that they need to enforce against SOC 2, and they're trying really hard to get compliant, and they are looking for tools to speed up that process. We love both use cases, but for people who are starting fresh, we have a great solution. All of the things that you're going to need for your SOC 2 are already pre-built in our library. It's as simple as just hitting the download button on the right-hand sidebar, and we will import all of the policies, the standards, the controls, the evidence, the processes, the criteria, frameworks, requirements. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff involved with your governance, risk, and compliance journey. But it does not need to be overwhelming because we are going to help you chunk it into bite-sized pieces and get through the process without too much pain and difficulty. To start, we're going to open up one of our presets, which you can see here. This is our acceptable use policy, which you have all the text that describes this document, a nice map that shows the relationships between the policy and its standards and controls, and then obviously a brief description at the top. I'm going to click import and confirm, and then our policy document is going to be imported into our vault. There's a lot going on here, and for some people who may not be familiar with the language of governance, risk, and compliance, we're going to take a step back before we jump directly into our acceptable use policy. To do that, let's go to our forest. We now, on our homepage, the forest, have a very simple tree diagram. We've got our organization, and we've got our acceptable use policy. There are at least 20 distinct policies we'll need to be able to complete our SOC 2 compliance, but acceptable use policy is one of the most important ones. Within this policy, you'll see, if I expand it, that we have multiple standards. Policies are the most essential document for your compliance journey. A policy describes what the mission and direction a company is going to take to fulfill their obligations. It's essentially a statement of intent. It says, we will do these things, but it doesn't get into the specifics. It doesn't, or at least it shouldn't, describe how you are going to do those things. That's what a standard is for. So if a policy is a document that you would give a customer that says, we are going to keep your data secure, then a standard is a document that says, here is how I'm going to keep our data secure. And notice the change in language. One is externally focused. It's to provide to a customer, whereas the other one is internally focused. It's me informing myself and my team what action steps need to happen in order to stay compliant with that policy. Then moving one step deeper, we have controls. Controls are essentially a checklist. So if a standard is a document that describes all of the work that you need to accomplish, then a control is each of the checklist items in that standard where you're saying, I have done this, I have done that, I have accomplished this work, I've accomplished that work. Within a control then, we've got a couple different things. We've got a process, and we've got evidence. And there's also a couple other elements too, but we'll discuss that later. A process is essentially a guide, a tutorial on how to do the work required to be able to check the box of your control. And evidence is the thing proving that you did the work. You can't just check a box and not be able to prove it later. Your auditor needs to be able to show that they evaluated your controls. You check the box, and here's a pretty picture of a secure work item that you've done. That's what your evidence does. Now, you'll notice that this whole view is gray. We have all of our work in draft mode right now because we're still building it out. If I click into my policy here and open up our policy, we'll see that it's got a lot of stuff, but it doesn't really describe our organization. It's generic. Easy example right here. You see in blue it says the organization. We have provided you with a ton of useful documents, but these documents are generalized. They aren't descriptive of your company. There's some work you're going to need to do as you import policies and standards. You'll go in and you'll start typing out additional content. You'll change some of the language here and there, and you'll make it tailor-made to your organization. For example here, if I start typing and say, there are elements of this policy that are in progress, you'll see it's going to then start expanding it. And if I want, I can hit tab and it'll add additional text. And I can keep doing that and quickly write a document without having to do a lot of manual entry. Though, of course, you should always double check our work. Nothing is flawless, and you should be aware of the limitations of the AI. For now, I'm just going to save this, and you'll see that it's asking us what we want a review date. All of your work is going to be on a schedule. You can't just apply a policy and have it live there forever because your company changes over time. Your needs and your expectations are going to evolve, and so you need an interval of evaluation. Usually for policies, it's going to be once a year. There's not a lot of things that are going to change on a yearly basis or sub-yearly basis for a policy. So here, I'm just going to set that to 1 year and hit save. This will update our policy text, although we didn't really change much. And here we can see that the review date is set to 365. This document, though, is still in draft mode. It's not yet available to our auditors to review, and we're not going to be able to make any definitive statements about your environment based off of this document because of its current status. If I want, I can move this document to the publish state. Now, for demonstration purposes, we will be publishing this document, but in practice, we would recommend that you go through the work to write out the correct contents for your policies and your standards, collect your evidence, do all of that before you publish because it will look better. You'll be in a more complete state when you publish if you've already done all of the work versus what you'll see here, where when I publish, it's now shown in red, and we've got a lot of standards that are unhealthy now because everything downstream of this policy also gets published when you publish a policy. Here now you can see our map of this policy. We've got a lot of red items. It's a lot of work that needs to be accomplished, but as you're going to see shortly, there's some cool cheating that we can do to make this process a lot faster. So here I'm going to open up our standards. I'm going to go down to general use requirements, and then I'm going to select our comprehensive privacy notice and select the privacy statement. Most companies are going to have a privacy statement. If you collect data from a customer, you probably have one. You may or may not know where that policy statement is located, but it's going to be somewhere. For now, I'm just going to upload evidence. It's a screenshot. It's going to show the contents of my privacy statement. I'm going to say this is a screenshot of my privacy statement. And I'm going to set the evaluation period to 1 year. Your privacy statement's probably not changing very frequently, so it's reasonable to assume that a yearly evaluation should be set. Then I'm going to set confirm, and it's going to upload this document, and now you'll see that this evidence is marked as healthy. So up here, our schedule, 365 days left. It's now showing green for the state, and this item is now green there. But you'll note that the controls associated with it and the processes are still shown in red. If I go back to my forest view, open up the acceptable use policy, and then go to general use requirements, you'll see comprehensive privacy notice is mostly red, but it has some green now. You'll also note that the employee internet usage and the email and communication standards are also slightly green as well. That's because both of those other standards have some same evidence requirements. So if I open them, you'll see privacy statement is relevant to both email and communication as well as general use requirements. The employee internet usage has another evidence item that I previously uploaded, which is why that one is showing in green. And then also, you'll see that we have these process documents here. As I said before, process documents are the specific steps that you need to go through in order to upload evidence. So you need to click these two buttons, you need to follow this or that link, and here's where you find the document, take a screenshot, upload it to Valdyr. That's what a process is. Some processes are going to be hundreds of lines long because there's a lot of work involved in that particular evidence, and some processes might take you 30 seconds. Easy examples of those: if I am trying to show that we require multi-factor authentication to access our banking institution, I would just take a screenshot of Chase Bank showing that requirement. Meanwhile, if you have something more complex, like a backup integrity test of customer data in a cloud environment, that might be a multi-day process because there's a lot of individual complex steps involved. So you might see a ton of contents in there for each and every step you need to go through. You might schedule that months in advance, and there's a lot of work. Thankfully, the vast majority of what your experience will be is the former. Simple screenshots, quick work, upload evidence, do it once a year. Don't think about it too much until the compliance interval comes around. And then 10% of your work is going to be the longer form contents where you schedule it out, you set up meetings around it, and you do a lot of work for those items. But again, they're infrequent. You've probably got 5 or 10 of those items you have to do each year. So here, that we're looking at our documentation management process, which ironically is also going to be fulfilled by Valdyr. A lot of your documentation is going to be uploaded and managed in the process viewer within the Valdyr toolset. But here we can just describe that. We can say, hey, we use Valdyr for all of our process management and move on with our lives. Maybe type out some text. For now, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to say save and tell it to review in a year because it's actually healthy right now. There's nothing that needs to be done. So hit save, and then we'll see that this item, if I refresh, will be marked as healthy, and we'll see here that we have some healthy evidence, but all of our controls are still unhealthy because there are other processes, other evidence that we need to collect. That is everything you need to know about internal compliance. It's a little bit of an overstatement. There's a ton more theory crafting we could do. There's a ton more intricacies we could get into, but at a really basic fundamental level, all you really need to think about is making sure that your policies are prescriptive of the work you're going to be performing to keep customers safe. Your standards are going to be descriptive of how you're going to do that work. Your controls are going to be checklists of the work that has been done, and evidence is going to be simple proof that you did the work, and processes are going to be showing you how to collect the evidence and do the work required to check those controls off the list. So that's the internal work of a GRC environment. Flipping the narrative, it's always good to have a compliance environment. It's good to keep yourself and your company safe, but we don't do it for nothing. Generally, you have a goal, and for many of our customers, that's going to be SOC 2 compliance. To that end, if you click on the framework view, you'll see that there's no frameworks here. We haven't imported anything. But just like our policy importing process, we can also import frameworks as well. Currently, we just have the NIST CFS and the SOC 2 in this particular context, but we're also rolling out other frameworks that you can add additionally later. For now, I'm going to import the SOC 2 framework and hit confirm. It'll take a moment as it maps all of the criteria and requirements of SOC 2 against our policies. If I'm going over to the framework view here, I can click on our SOC 2 framework. It'll open up and we will see a really cool star chart. This star chart shows SOC 2 in the center. The goal is for this to be green. SOC 2 is massive. There are a ton of individual work items that need to be accomplished. But just like how collecting evidence for one control will probably satisfy another control somewhere else, like we showed earlier, doing one piece of work that satisfies one criteria of SOC 2 is probably going to satisfy 3 or 4 other items within SOC 2 as well. So here we can see the central star of SOC 2, and then orbiting it, we've got some larger and some smaller criteria items. Each of these criteria items describes the things that the general industry expects you to be doing to be safe and to be compliant with SOC 2. We've got a context description, and we've got a more detailed set of considerations that you should be aware of as you implement this criteria, which we've already done a lot of this work for you with how we've built our policies, our standards, our controls. They're all going to map really well together to accomplish the requirements of this criteria. And then within the criteria, we have a set of requirements. Requirements are more like the control checklists. They're all of the individual bits and pieces that your auditor is going to be looking at and saying, did they do this? Did they do that? Are they missing this? Are they missing that? If we click into one of our requirements here, we will see a much shorter list of things on the sidebar because it's just one individual item, and it's going to map directly to one of our controls. That's how you relate a framework like SOC 2 to your internal compliance environment. It's through the requirement of the framework mapping to a control of your compliance environment. So if I click on this unhealthy item here, we'll see, hey, this is everything we need to do with our endpoint data protection. You can see we've got evidence that we need to collect, and we've got 2 processes that we need to update and validate. If we have a fully fleshed out and built out internal compliance environment, you should be able to simply download the SOC 2 framework to your environment in Valdyr, and it will show up green because all the work is done. There is nothing that you need to manually do within the framework view. The framework view is just descriptive of what SOC 2 expects and maps against the work you have or have not done within your internal compliance environment. Okay, there is a ton of stuff that we've talked about. Might be overwhelming. If you have additional questions, always feel free to reach out to us. We also have a ton more stuff that we could cover, but I want to make sure that we keep this video nice and short as an introduction. Thank you for your time. Have fun. Reach out if you need help.